domain is called fighting for a cause. Here, the word fighting means working hard to accomplish something, and a cause is a goal. So fighting for a cause means working hard to reach a goal. You will learn about a number of ordinary people who helped make extraordinary changes in the United States because they fought for important causes. They were regular people who saw some unfairness, and they tried to change what they saw. Throughout history, people have had to stand up and demand that they be treated fairly. They have fought for equal rights for themselves and others. These are rights that everybody should have. You have to be very brave to stand up for what you believe in. Over the next couple of weeks, you will find out about 7 people who took a stand against inequality and demanded certain rights. You will discover that most of these people lived a long time ago, but what they achieved affects us today. They made the world a much fairer place. They fought for equal rights for everyone. One of the types or categories of rights people have is called civil rights. Civil rights are those rights the government gives to people. Civil rights in the United States include freedom of speech, the right to vote, and protection from discrimination or being treated unfairly because of your religion or skin color. Civil rights also include the right to be treated equally under the law. Different countries have different ideas about civil rights, but the people you will hear about in this domain all lived in the United States, so you will learn about civil rights and other rights people have in this country. Many of the people in the stories that follow had to fight for some of the rights that we now take for granted or just assume that we will always have. However, these people didn't fight with violence, they fought with words and with peaceful actions. As a result, they changed the world for the better. For a very long time, people weren't protected by any rights at all. For hundreds, even thousands of years, people were at the mercy of those in charge. To be at mercy means that they have power over you. Monarchs, such as kings, military leaders, or tribal leaders, governed with an iron fist. That means they were very strong and strict. Over time, people began to demand some rights. They wanted to select their leaders. They wanted to vote. They wanted to own property, and they wanted the right to practice a religion the way they wanted to. Eventually, monarchs changed their ways or were replaced by elected governments. Gradually, governments started giving people civil rights, which meant that people would be treated more fairly. The United States government has made this promise to treat people more fairly. Sadly, when governments do not guarantee rights, people face great difficulties. Often the most basic human needs, such as enough food to eat, a safe place to live, and a good education and job, are denied. We should never forget how lucky we are to live in a country that cares about people and their rights. Even in the United States, however, the government and some more powerful groups of people have not always treated everyone fairly and equally, and they kept certain groups of people from having the same rights. Some very brave people have fought to change this. For a very long time, in many parts of the world, women did not have the right to vote. Even in the United States, it wasn't until 1920s that women were granted or given the right to vote. This change to the law happened after women protested, marched, and campaigned for this right. To protest means to show that they were upset with something. Until the mid-1890s in parts of the United States, many African Americans were slaves or people who were forced to work for no money and were not free to make their own choices about their lives. Even after slavery was abolished or ended in some states, African Americans did not have the same legal rights as white people and were not treated equally. In the South, for example, African Americans were not allowed to attend certain schools or eat at certain restaurants. Barriers were placed in the way when African Americans tried to vote. In this domain, you will learn about 2 people who helped to defeat or end this inequality. With their supporters, they marched, campaigned, and demanded equal rights under the law until finally, in 1964, President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. This act removed unfair laws by prohibiting or ending discrimination. The following year, the Voting Rights Act removed all voting barriers for African Americans. This meant that African Americans would be allowed to vote just like all Americans without facing discrimination. Throughout history of this country, there have been certain people dedicated to make sure that all citizens have the civil rights they deserve. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers, wrote the words, "All men are created equal." The founding fathers were the group of men who helped to form our government over 200 years ago. He wrote those words in a very long time ago in a document called the Declaration of Independence. This document was a letter of protest against the unfair treatment of the colonists by the British. The colonists fought for their rights and freedoms and founded a new nation, the United States of America. In this domain, you will find out about 7 individuals who, like Thomas Jefferson and the other founding fathers, stood up for what they believed in. Here's a quick introduction and summary of the achievement for which each one is known. Susan B. Anthony thought that women should have the same educational and employment opportunities as men. This means she fought for girls and women to be able to go to school and get the kind of jobs that boys and men could get. Susan believed that women should be allowed to vote. She dedicated her whole life to making the world a fairer place for women. Eleanor Roosevelt worked to improve the quality of life for many groups of people, but especially for children, women, Native Americans, and African Americans. She was concerned about the fact that girls did not have the same educational opportunities as boys, and that far too many African Americans lived in poverty. She traveled all over the United States and talked to poor and needy. She encouraged her husband, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to make changes that would reduce poverty and let everyone live a better life. Mary McLeod Bethune worked to create educational opportunities for African American girls during a time when there were separate schools for children of different skin color. She started a school in Florida that later became a college. Some people in her community did not like what she was doing and tried to stop her. They bullied her, but she would not give up. Eventually, Mary became so successful that several U.S. presidents sought her advice on how to make this country a fairer place for all. Jackie Robinson was bright, well-educated, and a terrific athlete. He became the first African American to play Major League Baseball. When Jackie first began playing Major League Baseball, some of his fellow team members and fans treated him badly. Jackie did not give up. Because of his courage and talent, he changed people's attitudes or their views about things. Remember, courage is bravery that one demonstrates when facing a difficult time. On a cold December evening many years ago, an African-American woman named Rosa Parks sat on a crowded bus. When the driver asked her to give up her seat to a white man who did not have a seat, she refused. She found the courage to say no. After Rosa was arrested, people came together and decided that they wouldn't ride the Montgomery City buses until everyone had the same right as white people. This was the beginning of the civil rights movement that challenged unfair laws in the South. Remember, the civil rights movement is the series of events that involve people fighting for equal rights for all people. Martin Luther King Jr. is perhaps the most famous member of the civil rights movement. He believed in bringing about change through nonviolence. Nonviolence is the refusal to take physical action against someone who is treating people badly or unfairly. In 1965, nearly 1/2 of African Americans lived in poverty, and many experienced discrimination every day. Because of Martin's leadership, the civil rights movement forced change and helped to create opportunities for many people who had experienced discrimination. It became against the law to discriminate against someone because of race, color, religion, or the country in which they were born. Cesar Chavez knew firsthand about how hard it was to be a farm worker who had to travel from farm to farm. He knew that farm workers who did this type of work earned very little money for the hard work they did. In 1962, Cesar and his friend organized thousands of farm workers into a group called a union. Because so many people came together as part of this union and demanded change, Cesar found a way to improve the lives of all farm workers. The people you will learn about had courage. Sometimes they were bullied or threatened, but this did not stop them from doing what they knew was right. As you hear these stories, think about how different life was all those years ago when these people set out to make the world a better place.